Hello, everyone, and welcome. Today, we delve into the glitz and the shadows of the Jazz Age with F. Scott Fitzgerald's masterpiece, The Great Gatsby.
And what a delight it is, Hal. Thank you. It's a book that's had my heart since the first read. Such tragic love amidst the turbulence of the American dream.
Oh, Amelia, always the romantic. It'll be fascinating to discuss the tragic love, as you call it. Though I suspect Fitzgerald was penning a cautionary tale rather than a love story.
That's a fine point, Lenny. Fitzgerald certainly layered the novel with multiple themes.
Absolutely, Hal. And the era itself was a character. The parties, the music, it's why I love the book. The 1920s roar to life in every glittering, decadent line.
You make it sound positively enchanting, Izzy.
It is, Amelia. It's a time capsule of passion and disillusionment. You can almost hear the jazz.
Don't forget the rampant materialism and moral decay. It was an era of excess, and Fitzgerald didn't shy from showing its pitfalls.
Lenny always provides a dose of reality. Well, let's steer back to the purpose of this introduction. We can't forget our dear listeners may not all be versed in Gatsby's allure or repulsion. Amelia, would you kindly offer us a summary of the novel and its primary themes?
Of course, Hal. The Great Gatsby explores themes of idealism, resistance to change, the hollowness of the upper class, and the fallacy of reinventing oneself, all within the confines of a love story rife with longing.
A succinct and spot-on encapsulation, Amelia. And to give us even better footing, perhaps I can share a bit about the Jazz Age.
Just as long as we remember that for all its sparkle, the Jazz Age was a powder keg of social change and increasing disparity. Not all that glitters is gold.
Right, Lenny? Fitzgerald captured that contradiction, and it's why the novel persists in relevance. It's historical and yet so current.
My intention precisely, Izzy. The Great Gatsby serves as a mirror to the era and to Fitzgerald himself. Its reception was mixed at first, but today it stands as an indelible monument in American literature.
It's grown in stature like a fine wine, although I'm sure Lenny thinks it's more akin to vinegar.
You know me too well. Wine or vinegar, it certainly leaves an aftertaste.
Any piece of literature that stirs this much debate is a gift. Now let's prepare to open the floor for a roundtable of initial impressions, but be warned, it might be as heated as one of Gatsby's own lavish affairs. Shall we begin? Let's journey back in time, shall we, to the era that Fitzgerald captured so vividly in The Great Gatsby. Izzy, would you give us your perspective on the cultural backdrop of the novel?
Absolutely, Hal. Fitzgerald wasn't just writing a novel. He was painting an era. The 1920s were all about jazz, bootleggers, flappers, and speakeasies. He managed to encapsulate the spirit of freedom and the dark underbelly of American society coming into the modern age.
And he did so beautifully. The parties at Gatsby's mansion are almost a character in their own right, so lavish and full of life.
And full of people chasing superficial highs. Let's not glorify it completely. Fitzgerald saw the corruption behind the confetti. That's the whole point. The setting isn't just a backdrop, it's an indictment.
I hear you, Lenny, but you can't deny the allure of that era, the allure Fitzgerald encapsulates. It's a dance on the edge, and that's important context.
Lenny does have a point, but Izzy, your insight into the cultural setting is enlightening. Post-World War I America was a nation trying to find its new identity, caught between the fading Victorian morals and the birth of the modern era. That transition, that conflict between old and new values, is etched into every page.
I love that the novel is historical, but doesn't feel stuck in time. It speaks to us now, because we're still grappling with some of these issues.
And beyond the societal aspects, the personal costs were tremendous. The characters are all, in some way, casualties of their time, especially Gatsby.
Hold on. Are we suggesting that Gatsby is a mere victim of his time? He made his bed, illicitly, I might add. His tragedy was as much personal choice as it was historical circumstance.
It's a combination, no doubt. Fitzgerald uses Gatsby as both a product and a critic of the period, a walking juxtaposition, if you will.
Hal, that's a brilliant observation. Gatsby as both participant and commentator really encapsulates that tension, so exemplary of the era.
And despite any cynicism, we have to remember that people were trying to find joy after the devastation of the Great War. The frivolity had an undercurrent of healing, or at least escape.
Escape, perhaps. Healing? Doubtful. But Izzy, you're right to highlight their motivations, however fleeting their joys were.
This has been an invigorating start, addressing the settings that give The Great Gatsby its lush and layered atmosphere. There's much to discuss, and our opinions, as varied as they are, reflect the complexity Fitzgerald wove into the setting and historical context of the novel. Shall we transition to the topic of the American dream?
Indeed. There's a wealth of discussion waiting for us there.
Moving on to the portrayal of the American dream in The Great Gatsby, it's a central theme and one ripe for analysis. Lenny, what's your take on this?
Well, Hal, Fitzgerald doesn't paint a pretty picture of the American dream. He shows it as a facade, a lure that brings Gatsby and others to their undoing. Their pursuit of wealth, status, and love all ends up being hollow. If anything, the novel is a warning against the blind chase of this dream.
But Lenny, isn't there something beautiful in the pursuit itself? Gatsby's hope and his belief in the possibility of a happier life? Sure, it may be an illusion, but the hope, that's pure, isn't it?
Beautiful? More like tragic. Gatsby's hope was misplaced. It was in a dream sold to him by a society that values the superficial. His hope, Amelia, is based on the false promise of the dream.
The dream isn't the villain here. It's what it became in that era. Fitzgerald was critiquing the distortion of the American dream, not the concept itself, but the materialism it got wrapped up in.
Izzy raises a good point. The American dream was originally about freedom and opportunity, not just wealth and excess. Fitzgerald shows us how it was co-opted into something much less noble.
Exactly. It's a bleak realization, though. The novel is brilliant because it doesn't let you off easy. The dream is a mirage.
I have to disagree, Lenny. It's a cautionary tale, yes, but there's an implicit hope that the dream is attainable if pursued for the right reasons. Gatsby's dream is just misplaced in Daisy, who is unworthy of such devotion.
I see merit in both views. However, the novel does suggest the corruption of the dream in the context of the 1920s. Yet the dream endures, and in some ways, isn't that the point? The dream adapts and survives, even if its seekers don't.
Well said, Hal. It's the resilience of that dream, despite the era's flaws. It makes you question whether the American dream itself is flawed, or if it's simply the pursuit that's flawed.
Maybe they're intertwined. The pursuit reflects the dream's imperfections. Still, can't argue with your optimism, Izzy. It's a refreshing contrast to my own cynicism.
And your cynicism is an anchor, Lenny. It grounds our discussion, preventing us from floating away on mere idealism.
Both skepticism and idealism have their place in this rich tapestry of discussion. Shall we probe into the individual character's pursuit of this dream? Now let's turn our focus to the centerpiece of our novel, Jay Gatsby. Amelia, could you share your perspective on Gatsby's tragic flaw?
Absolutely, Hal. Gatsby's tragic flaw, in my eyes, lies in his unyielding idealism. He has crafted this dreamlike image of Daisy that blinds him to her flaws, and his single-minded pursuit of this ideal destroys him.
I'd venture to say his flaw isn't just his idealism, but his delusion. He thinks he can literally repeat the past, and that kind of thinking is a recipe for disaster.
It's so complex, though. Gatsby's flaw is also his most admirable quality. His ability to hope and to dream is what makes him so compelling, so magnetic.
Compelling, sure, Izzy, but let's not put his criminal activities on the back burner. He's a bootlegger, a criminal. His hope and dreams are financed by corruption.
That's true, Lenny, and it certainly complicates our view of him. But doesn't that make Gatsby's struggle more human? A flawed pursuit of what he perceives as purity?
It's that dichotomy that makes him an enduring character. His intentions, misguided or not, resonate with the eternal hope that characterizes the human spirit.
And Fitzgerald never lets us forget Gatsby's beginnings. His transformation from James Gatz to Jay Gatsby is a story of self-invention that, while flawed, is relatable in its ambition.
Relatable ambition or not, let's not romanticize his choices too much. He wanted to play in the big leagues, and he got in over his head. There's a price for flying too close to the sun.
Lenny offers a sobering counter to your points, Amelia and Izzy, yet all of you provide invaluable insights. Gatsby is indeed a multiplicity of contradictions, as elusive as the green light he reaches for. Shall we move on to examine how these personal ambitions influence the other characters in the story? The narrative style Fitzgerald employs in The Great Gatsby is distinctive and serves as a lens through which the entire story is both colored and filtered. Izzy, you've often noted how the symbolism in the novel adds depth. Could you elaborate on that for us?
Sure, Hal. The symbols in The Great Gatsby are like brushstrokes in a painting, adding layers of meaning. Take, for example, the green light at the end of Daisy's dock. It's not just a light, it represents Gatsby's aspirations, the future he longs for. Fitzgerald uses these symbols to communicate complex ideas in an elegant, almost poetic fashion.
That's beautifully said, Izzy. And the eyes of Dr. T.J. Eckelberg are another. They're like this omniscient presence watching over the moral decay of the characters, a silent witness to their sins.
I'll give you that the symbolism is rich, but it's the narrative technique that truly distinguishes Fitzgerald's work. Choosing Nick Carraway, a peripheral player, as the narrator adds a layer of complexity to everything we see and understand about Gatsby and the world he inhabits.
Lenny, that's a thoughtful observation. Nick's narration surely adds a veneer of impartiality, though he is not without his own biases. This technique allows us to see Gatsby both as a mysterious figure and, through Nick's eyes, as something of a tragic hero.
And can we talk about Fitzgerald's prose? It's like music with a rhythm that carries you through the story. It captures the era's extravagance and its emptiness. He's a master at conveying emotion without being heavy-handed.
That's true, Amelia. His writing feels almost effortless, which is the hallmark of a great writer, conveying so much in a way that feels so natural.
Natural, yes, but let's not overlook the strategic craftsmanship. Every word is chosen for impact, every scene constructed to build towards the climax. Fitzgerald might make it look easy, but that novel is tightly engineered.
It's a testament to his skill as a writer that we can have this conversation, picking apart his narrative technique and style with such fervor. Now, how do you all feel about Nick's role as both character and storyteller?
I think choosing Nick as the narrator was a stroke of genius. He's our guide, but he's also searching for truth himself, which makes us question what we're seeing and being told.
Agreed, Izzy. Nick is the right mix of inside and outside the story, giving us a somewhat reliable lens while also being inextricably linked to the outcomes.
Exactly. And he evolves, doesn't he? Nick starts off as an observer and becomes an essential part of the story. His journey mirrors our own as we traverse the novel's landscape.
Well put, everyone. Nick's growth as a character is indeed parallel to the reader's journey. The way Fitzgerald intertwines the narrator's perspective with the plot itself is yet another aspect that makes this novel the classic that it is. Let's shift our focus now to a character who often polarizes readers, Daisy Buchanan. Amelia, you often interpret Daisy as a significant romantic figure. How do you reconcile her actions in the narrative with this view?
I see Daisy as a product of her time and circumstance. Yes, she's flawed, perhaps even fickle, but she's also trapped by the expectations of her social status. I believe there's a genuine conflict within her between her comfort in wealth and her feelings for Gatsby, even if those feelings are complex and not entirely pure.
That's a charitable interpretation, Amelia. Daisy is the epitome of self-interest. Any love she has for Gatsby is secondary to her own preservation and privilege. Her romantic aspects are illusory. They exist only in Gatsby's, and perhaps our own, romanticized view of her.
There's truth in both perspectives, I think. Daisy may not be traditionally heroic, but she's an important reflection of the societal and gender limitations of her era. She's far from being just a villain or an object of desire. She is, in many ways, a mirror for the narrative's central themes of desire and disillusionment.
Izzy has a point. Daisy embodies the cynicism directed towards the old money ethos, yet her depth is often overshadowed by the narrative's focus on Gatsby's obsession and downfall.
And don't forget, Daisy's decisions have consequences. Her choices in the novel lead to some of its most tragic moments. Depth of character or not, her actions are indefensible.
But isn't that the sign of a well-written character? She's complicated, divisive, and ultimately she leaves us questioning the very notion of love and loyalty that the novel scrutinizes.
Amelia, that's an astute observation. Daisy indeed challenges us as readers to question those themes. She's not meant to be likable. She's meant to provoke and to personify the era's complicated relationship with love and wealth.
Speaking of love and loyalty, isn't Daisy just as much a victim of those themes as anyone else in the book? She's boxed in by societal norms and by Tom's infidelity. She has her reasons for being distant.
Victim or not, she plays an active role in the tragedy that unfolds. Her victimhood doesn't absolve her of responsibility.
It's clear that Daisy stirs a potent mix of sympathy and censure among us, as she likely does among all readers of The Great Gatsby. Shall we consider how these themes of class and society further inform the other relationships in the narrative? Class and society stratification are undeniably at the forefront of The Great Gatsby. Izzy, your insights into how the novel addresses these themes have always been thought-provoking. Please share your thoughts with the group.
It's clear to me that Fitzgerald uses class as a critical lens. The social mobility that Gatsby embodies is fraught with tension and hypocrisy. He's never truly accepted by the old guard, represented by Tom and Daisy. This distance from the upper echelons, despite his wealth, speaks volumes about the class constraints of the time.
The novel does an exceptional job at highlighting the stark divides between wealth and poverty, the newly rich and the aristocracy. Gatsby, with all his money, can't breach those divides, and neither can Nick, who remains an outsider to both worlds.
It's not just about money, though, is it? It's power and the perception of worth. Fitzgerald isn't just showing us the divide, he's criticizing the entire construct. Gatsby's lavish lifestyle is his armor, but it's no match for the entrenched power of birthright.
Lenny, you bring a critical reality to the surface. Fitzgerald indeed lays bare the illusion that wealth equates to acceptance. How do you believe this theme impacts our reading of the novel as a whole?
It's a tale of aspiration and disillusionment. The characters are chasing an ideal that's fundamentally flawed, because the class system itself is flawed. It forces us to ask if the American dream is really attainable, or if it's just another social construct.
And yet the yearning for something better, something more, is so innately human. That's what resonates with me. There's something universal in that struggle, even if the dream proves elusive.
Elusive is one way to put it, Amelia. But let's not forget that this struggle is not just Gatsby's, but also reflects the broader social changes of the 1920s. The clash of new money and old money is a battleground for power in an era of unprecedented change.
Indeed, Lenny. Each character's grasp for power, whether through wealth or connection, reveals the inherent instability of the era's social structure. As we continue to peel back the layers of class and society, let's also consider how the symbols and motifs within the novel contribute to this thematic framework. We've touched on this before, but let's delve deeper into the rich tapestry of symbolism and motifs in The Great Gatsby. Izzy, you have a keen eye for color symbolism. Share with us your insights.
Of course, Hal. Fitzgerald was very intentional with his use of color. Take the green light at the end of Daisy's dock. It symbolizes Gatsby's longing and the greater hope of the American dream. Then there's the use of white around Daisy, projecting innocence when we know she's anything but.
That's an intriguing point, Izzy. The colors almost become characters themselves, don't they? The way Fitzgerald uses them to add depth and irony is simply captivating.
I won't argue that the symbolism isn't clever, but let's not get lost in colors. The most chilling motif for me is the billboard with the eyes of Dr. T.J. Eckelberg, watching over the Valley of Ashes like the eyes of God, observing the moral decay of society.
Those eyes act as a silent sentinel, Lenny. The motif is one of the novel's most potent images, reflecting the loss of spiritual values amidst the era's materialism.
And don't forget the Valley of Ashes itself. It's a stark symbol of the desolation and rot that lies beneath the era's glittering surface.
Exactly, Izzy. Moreover, the valley represents the social divide, the gulf between the working class and the ethos of wealth, literally covered in the dust of their labor.
Precisely, Amelia. It's not just set dressing, it's a commentary on society. The rich play their games while the poor are left to pick up the pieces.
So far, this discussion on symbolism has been illuminating. It's clear that Fitzgerald used symbols not merely for decoration, but as integral components of his thematic structure. Shall we expand upon this and consider how motifs function in the framework of love and relationships in the novel? As we continue our exploration of The Great Gatsby, we encounter the complex web of love, marriage, and infidelity. Amelia, would you like to discuss how these elements come together in the novel?
Absolutely. The novel sharply criticizes the institution of marriage through the relationships of Tom and Daisy and Gatsby. The sanctity of marriage is mocked, affairs are had, and true feelings suppressed. Gatsby's illusion of love is contrasted with the very real cynicism of Tom's infidelity. It's a tumultuous portrayal of love and betrayal.
Let's be clear, though. There's nothing romantic about the infidelity we see here. Tom's affairs are about control, and Daisy's involvement with Gatsby has less to do with love and more to do with what Gatsby represents, a ticket to a nostalgia that never truly existed.
And yet Fitzgerald doesn't present love as entirely hopeless. In the tragedy of love and marriage, there's a critique but also a longing for something real and genuine. It's love, or the idea of love, that drives the characters to dramatic ends.
Dramatic, yes. But let's not forget how Daisy retreats back into her privileged world when confronted with the consequences of her actions. Love is certainly central to this story, but so is selfishness.
Lenny, your point is well taken, but perhaps it's the very failure of these relationships that underlines the hopelessness of the American dream. Love is commodified, as corrupted as the dream itself.
The intersections of love, marriage, and infidelity certainly force us to confront the limitations of the dream and the character's moral compasses. The backdrop of the 1920s seems to intensify these personal failings.
I'd argue that the era just magnified what was already there. The novel makes us ponder whether love can truly exist in a world consumed by the pursuit of wealth and status.
That might be true, Izzy. It seems to suggest that in the pursuit of material wealth, the character's emotional wealth is bankrupted. As we close this segment, we recognize that The Great Gatsby is as much a story about the failure of love as it is about the American dream. Shall we consider the role of our narrator, Nick Carraway, as we move into our next discussion? We've arrived at a crucial juncture in our discussion, the role of Nick Carraway as both narrator and participant in the novel. Izzy, how do you view Nick's reliability and his influence on the story?
Nick is fascinating because while he attempts to present himself as this objective observer, his narrative is steeped in bias. He's both inside and outside the story, sympathetic to Gatsby yet critical of the world he inhabits. It's his perspective that colors our interpretation of the events.
If we can call it a perspective. He's unreliable at best. His judgments are inconsistent. He forgives some characters while coming down hard on others for similar faults. His relationship with Jordan, for example, further complicates his ability to remain impartial.
But perhaps that's what makes him such a compelling narrator. He's flawed, human. We trust him because he admits his own shortcomings and tries to make sense of the world with a sincerity that resonates with the reader.
Amelia, your point is well taken. Nick does provide a comprehensive view of both Gatsby's character and the social environment of the novel. His human flaws indeed make him relatable and, paradoxically, lend him a degree of reliability.
A degree, maybe, but think of how much we rely on his narration to shape our view of Gatsby. Without Nick, Gatsby might be just another rich man with questionable morals. Nick is a filter, and we must always ask ourselves what gets caught in that filter and what gets through.
True, and Nick's growth over the course of the novel parallels the reader's understanding. As he becomes disillusioned with the East, so do we. He represents the loss of innocence in a morally compromised world.
Izzy, that's a profound interpretation. His character development mirrors the broader narrative arc. Now, let's consider Nick's ultimate role. What function does he serve in propelling the narrative forward?
Nick is our conduit to Gatsby, and through his eyes we see the tragedy unfold. He's the storyteller, but he's also a moral barometer for the era's excesses and failings.
A barometer? More like a thermometer, reactive to the fever around him, but not necessarily insightful on its cause. Still, without Nick, the story lacks its soul, its narrative heartbeat.
It's clear that we all see Nick as central to our experience of the novel, even as we debate his capacity for insight and truth. His own journey is critical to our understanding of The Great Gatsby. Shall we wrap up with our final thoughts before we conclude the session? As we draw our discussion to a close, let's take a moment to reflect on our exploration of The Great Gatsby today. Lenny, would you start us off with your final takeaway?
Certainly, Hal. Despite my earlier criticisms, it's undeniable that The Great Gatsby remains a powerful examination of the American soul. Fitzgerald's understanding of human desires and failings is etched into every page. It's a cautionary tale that, even in all its tragic beauty, warns us about the seductive destructiveness of certain dreams.
Your points throughout our conversation have been eye-opening, Lenny. Fitzgerald's work has this timeless quality because at its core, it's about longing for love, for acceptance, for success. And aren't we all longing for something, even now?
That's the exact sentiment that resonates with me, Amelia, particularly the way Fitzgerald connects individual desires to broader societal themes. This novel is a reflection, a statement, and a question all at once, and that's why it endures.
Admirably put, Izzy. The enduring relevance of The Great Gatsby cannot be overstated. Its thematic richness offers new insights at each reading. Now, Amelia, your parting thoughts?
Hal, this novel, to me, is an ode to the complexity of the human spirit. Fitzgerald has created a world that thrums with the vibrancy of an era and with characters who are as flawed and fascinating as any of us. It's a testament to the enduring power of great literature to hold up a mirror to our own lives.
Even if that mirror shows us things we'd rather not see, Amelia. But you're right, it's precisely those flaws that draw us in, make us think, make us feel.
And to bring to light, as Fitzgerald does expertly, the universal truths that bind us. Izzy, what are your parting remarks?
This novel underscores how deeply art and life intertwine. It's both specific to its time and universal in its themes. That's the beauty of The Great Gatsby. It's a cultural artifact that continues to speak to us because it addresses fundamental human desires and the consequences of chasing them.
Well said, everyone. The Great Gatsby indeed proves itself to be a multi-layered narrative that captures the essence of an era while also making profound statements on human nature. I want to thank each of you for your insightful contributions today. Our discussions around The Great Gatsby have been as engaging and multifaceted as the novel itself. I look forward to our next Robot Roundtable, where we'll bring the same depth and vigor to our new literary adventure. Until then, keep the pages turning.